All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the People Show. I hope that you all had a fantastic celebration on Labor Day. Labor Day is one of those holidays that's kind of overlooked. And the reason why I say that it's overlooked is because we don't have people who pay a whole lot of attention to Labor Day. But let me tell you something. Labor Day is really a special day. It is for all of those people who labor for us, work for us, and provide us with the services and doing the jobs, sweeping floors, cleaning up, doing all of those things that a lot of us, if we tell the truth, we would not do. We don't want to do. But because they labor. People who work at McDonald's, Burger King, cleaning floors, collecting garbage, all of that on our behalf. We enjoy those services. We enjoy what they do. We enjoy all of it. The people who labor and cook our food for us, people who pick our garbage up, build our homes, our electricians, our plumbers, people who clean up our hotel rooms and make sure that we have fresh, clean linen, all of that, all of that, all of that people do for you and I. They do that for us. And well, they don't get a lot of celebration. They don't get a lot of celebration. So I put out a post yesterday, and I think that we should all do that and really be appreciative of those people who work in those areas. Every one of them, people pick food, pick beans, pick fruit, and labor. Do all of that work that we enjoy those benefits. But they don't get any credit, right? They don't get any credit. Nobody celebrates them. But certainly glad that that we recognize them, right? We recognize them and the work that they do for us. I'm trying to make sure that all of this audio stuff is right because I am not that savvy at this stuff. I'm just not. I'm not that savvy at it. And I guess I'll eventually get it. So I want to make sure that for all of our YouTube followers that that I'm keeping up with you. Yeah, I want to make sure that. Okay, all right. That I'm doing everything that I need. So just hang with me just a minute. I'll get it here. So to make sure that those of you who can see me, I can see you on People's Show. There we go. Okay. I think that, let me hang on just 1 second. I'm going to be with you in just a second. Hang on. Those of you who just joined. All right, listen, I'm glad that you are here with me. But what I want to talk about, tonight is our legal hour, and we'll be talking with Cook County Circuit Court Judge Leonard, who will be on to answer all your legal questions. And we're going to be talking about foreclosures and how the court process works. And that he's going to answer questions. Are banks really trying to take your properties from you? Because I know that a lot of people think that banks are really trying to do that, and they are fearful of that. But we're going to learn about that court process, right? So we're going to learn about that in the court process. So you'll be able to participate with that. As a matter of fact, you'll be able to call in to the program and to the call-in number, which is 951. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. First person I want to talk about is Cornel West. It is outrageous. It's unconscionable. It's unthinkable that a man of his intelligence, who knows and understands in depth, who knows the policies, knows how to get the policies, and knows who's passed the policies that benefit the interest of Black people in America, and who has worked to protect our democratic process in America. For Cornel West to be operating in this dangerous path that he is operating on, under the disguise that he is challenging the status quo. I don't know his motive. I just know that his movement is incorrect, and we need to call him on it. I heard on another program today, I was listening to Tom Hartman in the car, and I happened to call in and got through. And it's very hard to get in. It's a very popular syndicated nationwide program. Tom Hartman does great work providing us with information on the great history of our democratic process and the two parties and the differences between the two, and all of that information that we learn from, and I certainly learned from. I've been listening to him for it's a better than 20 years now, and so I called in because I heard him talking about Cornel West, and Cornel West is, he was here in Chicago. Cornel West talking about having this independent run for president, which is he's never going to become president, but he can impact the presidential race, just as Tom Hartman pointed out that in 2000, Ralph Nader was the spoiler that gave the race to George Bush, and Ralph Nader regretted that, even though he didn't openly admit it. However, we cannot be politically irresponsible, especially when we have large reach and platforms. And this is not a time for one to have their grievances debated this way. If Cornel West has issues with the Democratic Party and how the Democratic Party has or has not met the moment, then what Cornel West should be doing is getting with the Democratic Party, aligning himself because he can get access, and they will give him access. And he should be going out on the stump and putting those issues and talking about those things that are important to him, which are important to our communities. He should not be trying to be a spoiler and put us in a very dangerous situation where his involvement and his participation as it is could end up giving the election to Donald Trump. He and Jill Stein. Jill Stein, that's all she operates as, a spoiler. And she operated as a spoiler in 2016. And if Jill Stein had not been in the race in 2016, Hillary Clinton would have been president, and we would not have the Supreme Court that we have today. Elections do matter. They do matter. You can't have this attitude of this 100% purity litmus test, because it doesn't exist. No matter who it is, there is no perfect candidate. There's no perfect person in office. We only have the best group or the best people for which we can work with. That's what we have. That's what we have. Brandon H., welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here. So the idea that we are going to have someone like Cornel West, with the education that he has, with the intelligence that he has, and whatever his grievance is, that he is going to decide to be a spoiler, is unconscionable, it's unthinkable, and it's wrong, and we need to call him out wherever we have a platform to do so. Right here on my tiny little platform, I'm going to do so. And I challenge Tom Hartman, and I'm challenging anybody else, that he needs to be called out. If in fact he doesn't change course, because he could be a spoiler in this race that gives this election to Donald Trump, along with Jill Stein, who gave it to, because of her involvement in the 2016 election, Donald Trump became the president, and we have the Supreme Court that we have. We're going to talk about that a little bit further on in the program, so please stick with me. We're going to get started with our legal hour, and joining me every Tuesday night is the Cook County Circuit Court Judge, Leonard Murray, who was here with us tonight, and we have a good conversation that we're going to be talking about. Judge Murray, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mark, and good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Great.
How was your Labor Day?
The weekends are always too quick.
No matter how long they are, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a good one, but you're right. Back to the grind. We are. All right. So glad to be with you. Want to talk about today foreclosures, and how that process works within the courts, and people who are having problems with their mortgages and challenges with their mortgage. I had a conversation, and I've heard this many of times from people who said, well, the bank, they're just trying to take my home. And so you working in a division of real estate, wanted to help us to understand what is the foreclosure division, how that court actually works. Is that court there for the protection of the banks, or is that court there for the protection of the homeowners?
Well, that's what a place to start. Well, the court system generally is there to serve the public, and sometimes that service is to large corporate entities, and then other times it's for the mom and pop situation, landlord tenant situation. and they're trying to collect rent payments that are overdue. So it services the entire community, top to bottom, however you view top to bottom. But it's not the exclusive province of any certain segment of society. It's there for all of us to use to adjudicate our complaints. And corporations are persons, legal fictions that they are, but they are legal persons, and they have a right to adjudicate uh, their complaints as well in the court. Uh, and mortgage foreclosure just happens to be a segment of the litigation system that exists, where lenders come to adjudicate defaults as they uh, pertain to mortgages. And let me do this real quick, Mark, because I don't want my laptop to crash. Let me
Okay.
go get the power cord for it. I'll be back in a
Okay.
couple
All
minutes.
right. All right. Okay. All right. While Judge Murray is doing that, I want to ask. Let's see. Brandon is asking, why is Sink running too? He isn't a natural born citizen. Well, I think Brandon, what all of these candidates who are involved, I believe that they are involved to try and be a spoiler so that they could just upturn our democratic process, which is why I think it's incumbent upon all of us to educate people on what this administration has done, which is some extraordinary policies that's been passed that is going to help the country and certainly um, uh, going to be beneficial to the African American community. And in fact, I'm going to be going through that in the next hour, line by line of the policies that's been passed by the Biden-Harris administration that has been more progressive than any other Democratic president administration in history, including President Obama, although he did some great things. But the Biden-Harris administration has far surpassed anything that I could have imagined in terms of passing policies that will benefit the Black community, from $16.5 billion going to directly to HBCUs, which is more than any other presidents have done combined. The lowest Black unemployment in history on record, as well as increasing Black wealth has increased by some 60% since pre-pandemic. Um, reverse the disinvestment of infrastructure to underserved communities, as well as making sure that many underserved Black communities have access, poor communities have access to the internet. Some 5 million families have been able to get affordable access to the internet. Black businesses have quadrupled in SBA applications and loans, as well as Black businesses have gotten more than $70 billion contracts from the federal government, which they could not do under the Trump administration because Trump bundled all of the contracts, which means that only supersized capacity corporations could benefit or could bid. The Biden-Harris administration unbundled those contracts so that smaller companies will have the opportunity to bid, and as a result, Black companies are getting $70 billion in contracts with the federal government. That's just a little bit of what they've done. It's just been, they have far surpassed what my imagination could be. All right, so we're going to go back. Judge Murray is back here with us, so we don't lose him. He's all powered up. And we are talking about the foreclosure process and how that works. And does it advantage one person or the other, or is it what is referred to as a court of equity?
Sure. And Mark, before you move away from your topic about how the federal government, principally under the Biden-Harris administration, has unbundled some of the funding and letting of contracts available in the private sector. I think the audience ought to know this number, and that is the numbers out there relative to what the Trump uh, administration did for HBCUs is $250 million.
Mhm.
But what the Biden-Harris administration has done for HBCUs is 16 billion.
Correct. 16 and
So
a half billion dollars. Yes.
that is a lot more money than 250 million. Believe me.
Well, to take it since you brought that up, to take it a step further, when Trump came into office, Trump zeroed out the budget, zero out of his budget for HBCUs. It took Alma Adams out of South Carolina, who was representative out of South Carolina, to put it back, and the Democrats passed it, as well as Walter what's his name? Walter Kimbrough, who was a two-time HBCU president that had to go in and educate President Trump as to how this actually works. And the $250 million was not $250 million that actually went to HBCUs. It was $250 million that went to HBCUs and HSIs, which are Hispanic Served Institutions. And if you are a institution that has at least 25% enrollment of Hispanics, you qualify for those grants, like Texas A&M and Harvard and Ohio State. All of these institutions have at least 25%, so they qualify for it. HBCUs actually got $90 million out of the $250 million.
50 million. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, the Biden-Harris administration has put $16.5 billion into HBCUs direct.
Right.
So that's not including minorities, but $16.5 billion into HBCUs. And they have put pressure on the banks down in the South that have the land grant, the land bank grants to the tune of $12 billion that they have not given to the HBCUs that they've gotten from the federal government. And so, like, I think it's Florida A&M is due $2 billion, and Texas or Southern State University is due $500 million. There's like $12 billion that's due to those HBCUs that have come from the federal government that the states have not made those banks give to them. And the president has put a letter demanding that they take those funds and give it to the HBCUs. That is what's meant for them. So, it's just extraordinary what this administration has done through its policies that are going to benefit Black people at every level, as well as talking about putting the child tax credit that they were able to reduce by half the number of Black children living below the poverty rate or living in poverty by giving $6,000 per child to the families. And of course, the Republicans rejected it, and they weren't able to extend it. And Kamala Harris is talking about making that permanent. Just some extraordinary policies that this administration has been able to do, and we're gonna continue to tout that. Now, I think the Democrats do a terrible job of selling their story. They do a very bad job at selling their story. They have so much that they've accomplished, but they just don't do a good job of selling their story. And I hope they get that turned around and that they're successful.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So back to mortgage foreclosure. So I think it's important to explain the structure relative to lending for purposes of real estate purchase, refinance, improvement, what have you, construction, development. So when folks talk about they got a mortgage, what they really mean is that some institution, and sometimes it can be an individual loan, they receive from someone connected to real estate. Now, so it's really just a note, a promissory note to pay back a certain amount of money within a certain period of time, and usually with interest on the loan. Um, the way that the lender, and there are all sorts of lenders in the mortgage game. There's some syndication that private individuals do. I had a case roughly a year and a half ago that involved a private lending situation where a group of folks syndicated about $5 million to loan someone in order to do some development. Unfortunately, the deal went south. So they found themselves foreclosing on the loan. And it was interesting because, to me at least, because those mortgagees and the person who advances the money is considered the mortgagee, referred to as a mortgagee. The person who actually borrows the money is referred to as a mortgagor. So it's also important to become familiar with the terminology. But again, remember, it's a loan, uh, and you promise to repay this money over certain terms. The mortgage instrument itself is the security instrument that guarantees or enforces the right of repayment. So if there is a default in payment of the note, the underlying note, then this mortgage instrument that you sign as the borrower uh, gives the lender certain rights as to enforce the obligation to repay uh, by taking back, or at least taking the property and forfeiting your interest.
Now,
Or
before you go there, the mortgage note itself is the collateral instrument that collateralizes the asset. The note is that which you personally guarantee to pay
Right,
the
right. It's a personal guarantee, and the mortgage is the lien
right.
that you grant to enforce repayment of the loan. So I know most people say I have a mortgage. Well, really, what you have is you sign a note to repay money that you guarantee repayment of by also granting a mortgage against real estate of some sort. I mean, there are other mechanisms to that are available to guarantee payment of a loan. It could be investments, personal investments of some sort, stocks, bonds, uh, interest in a company, bank accounts. There are all sorts of other mechanisms by which one can put up collateral in order to guarantee repayment of a loan. So let's assume that let's take a simple case. So let's assume that you borrow $100,000 and it's a 10-year loan. So on average, you would be paying this. This is not reality. I'm just using this as an example. But on average, you would be repaying principal at the rate of about 10,000 a year. However, that's before the cost of borrowing is factored in. So depending upon the interest rate that is extended to you by virtue of who you are, your credit history, um, whatever else you may have, your enterprise, your annual income, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, that will dictate the interest rate uh, that would be pertinent to the note. Um, and it also it's a function also of just what the market is in terms of lending. Uh, I think prime now is now less than 5%, I believe. Um, so typically, your mortgage rate of interest will be prime plus some additional points. So we're going to use 7%, and I'm not going to do the math, but essentially, uh, uh, if you borrowed $100,000 with a 7% interest rate, then if you did not repay a penny of that loan, 1 year later, you would owe 100,000 plus $7,000 in interest. So, and you amortize this over whatever the life of the mortgage is. I'm sorry, the life of the note is. In fact, there are some loans where you pay back a certain portion of principal plus interest. So, for example, the
Right.
example I gave of a $100,000 loan, if the note says you got to pay back 10,000 a year over 10 years, so that's roughly $875 a month, I think,
Mhm.
somewhere in that vicinity. So you're going to pay 875 a month plus interest on the outstanding balance. So your payment would be 875 plus the interest on the outstanding balance. So that mortgage amount would probably roughly be some in the area of $1,500 a month. But over time, while the installment payment against the principal would remain the same, the interest you pay would be reduced because you are paying down principal. That's not the standard way a mortgage, I'm sorry, a note is calculated. Um, there's it's pretty easy to do the math, especially with technology today, in terms of
Yeah, so $100,000 note at 7%, the principal and interest payment would be $870.23 a month.
okay, all right. So that would pay off this loan in 10 years with a monthly payment of that amount. So let's go. Let's assume that things are going along swimmingly for a few years. Let's assume that this money that you borrowed was used to purchase a home, uh, and the $100,000 is what is owed after your own contribution to the purchase of it. You put in a down payment of some sort. Usually, a lender will want you to have some skin in the game as well. So they're going to want you to uh, pay some of the portion of the purchase price from your own resources, so that essentially you are buying or paying for the equity in the purchase of the home. But let's say things are going fine, but then somewhere along the line, something bad in your life happens. It could be illness. It could be if it's a two income household, maybe one of the parties loses employment, or there's some sort of job change of sorts. Um, any number of things. The necessity, maybe that one of the household members uh, must then stay home to take care of a minor child. There are any number of things that happen in life, as all of us know. So then, despite our own personal tragedies, um, the lender may be sensitive, but they're still going to be looking for that monthly payment of sorts on the loan. And after a period of time, if you continue to be unable to make that payment, then you probably will begin to receive notices suggesting that if you don't cure this default within a certain period of time, then the lender is going to seek uh, uh, to foreclose on its lien, uh, and based on the default of the mortgage, I'm sorry, of the note, that's happened based on personal circumstances. Um, so there's they refer to that when a lender seeks to collect on a note secured by a mortgage. They call that a foreclosure. So what happens in that case is that after the lender has gone through these steps of giving notices and sometimes attempting to try to mediate the situation with you, uh, they resort to a court process. And a foreclosure is just another lawsuit. It's a lawsuit based on someone owing someone else some money. In this case, it's money owed related to real estate. So there will be a complaint prepared, and in this complaint, it would lay out the connection, the basis for um, the loan default, uh, the terms of it, who's obligated, who's the obligor, on the note. Um, and then it would also specify that the property is secured by a mortgage. And in the various paragraphs of this complaint, and again, a lawsuit is just any other litigation. Uh, there is certain parts of the law that pertain to it, but it's another case. It's just another lawsuit. Uh, so all these facts would be set forth and alleged in a complaint. The lender is then obligated to serve the individuals associated with the loan, be it uh, both members of the household, if both of them are connected to the loan, or it could be a single person, it could be a company. Companies get foreclosed as well. But whoever is the obligor on the underlying loan secured by mortgage would be the defendant in the case. And essentially, the principal allegations in the complaint, and there's a series of numbered paragraphs, would set forth all these facts: when the loan started, the rate, who's obligated, uh, dictate when the default started, uh, what is the current default amount, uh, monthly amount, the amount that's accrued by virtue of the non-payment of the note and interest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And requesting that the court, first of all, deems that there is in fact a default, because if there's no default, there can be no foreclosure. And secondly, if the court concludes that there is a default, because you can sue on the note without foreclosing. That's another factor. Even though you may have a loan secured by a mortgage, uh, the lender can sue just on the note and not foreclose. Okay, that's not typically what occurs, but it's possible. So, so in this case, we're imagining a case based on foreclosure of collateral, typical situation of a single family residence where the loan was 100,000. Uh, the parties connected to it were able to service it for a couple, 3 years, and then something happened in their lives, and they were no longer able to make the monthly payments associated with the loan. So they filed this case in court, and the cases are filed based on the county where the property resides. Now, there is an exception. It is possible that the case could be brought in federal court, although I can just tell you from personal experience, where diversity is involved, and I'll explain diversity in a moment. Uh, Federal courts are not real receptive to the idea of being involved in the foreclosure of personal residences. No, they're more receptive to the idea of commercial situations, companies involved in loan defaults, but not so much when it concerns the average citizen, who's unfortunately is uh, experiencing difficulties and for whatever reason is behind on the payment of the loan. So it's based on state law, and there is a section under state law that talks about the foreclosure process, the kind of notice that must be given, service, on and on and on. And these cases are brought in what's called the Chantry Division of the Circuit Court, at least in Cook County. Cook County is a huge circuit where there are divisions that are specialized for certain areas of the law. Of course, everybody knows about criminal court. There's probate, which deals with the states of uh, decedents and disabled persons and minors. Um, there is divorce court, another section of the court, and then there's chancery court, and these that's a division of the court that handles not only foreclosures but other equitable matters um, that arise in the commercial setting. Um, in fact, I spoke to a colleague a little earlier this evening about a situation where a couple got together and somehow entered into an arrangement relative to real estate. They no longer are harmonious. So one of the two filed an action to evict the other, and the person who is still in possession, that the person who filed the case moved out. It was a romantic situation. They moved out. Uh, the other remained. So the person who moved out is now suing their former uh, love interest over possessing this property. So that is a chancery matter, because neither one of them had any papers that specify what their relative position were, what their rights were. So it will be up to a judge, what some people refer to as a chancellor, adjudicating what the relative interests uh, are of the parties involved, and what the disposition should be of this real estate interest that both of them have some connection with. Um, so mortgage foreclosure is a section in Chancery. There are a number of other sections involved. There's uh, a section dealing with uh, liens relative to um, contractors who do work on property and for whatever reason don't get paid, mechanics lien, and other areas. It's a broad area and it covers any number of topics. Um, but as it relates to foreclosure, there is a group within the Chancery section who exclusively deal with foreclosures. And if my memory is correct on this, there are probably somewhere between 5 and 7 judges of the Chancery set who handle only mortgage foreclosure cases. Uh, and there's a dirty little secret out there that some folks might be aware of, and that is back in excuse me, 2008, 2009, just before Barack Obama was elected president, uh, Cook County had the highest rate of foreclosures in the country. It's a dirty little secret that most folks are unaware of. There was something
The
like
highest rate of foreclosures pre Barack Obama's sentence or presidency.
Yes.
Yes.
It's my understanding that there were more than 60,000 foreclosures that were filed in just 1 year in Cook County.
Yeah, that was produced as a result of the George W. Bush presidency, when they completely deregulated the mortgage industry and the mortgage lending industry and allowed for them to start bundling and selling mortgages off to the secondary market.
Right.
And, you had people who were just doing all kinds of nefarious things. I used to be in the mortgage business. I used to have a mortgage company, and I got out of the mortgage business because of what I saw happening in 2003.
Yeah, and they were securitizing these mortgages in bundles and creating companies that essentially were selling stock. Uh, that was a function of all these loans that were bundled together and securitizing them, and the just the normal scrutiny involved in an application of this type just totally uh, failed, and that's why we had so many foreclosures. There were a lot of uh, loans that were requiring refinancing within 3 to 5 years, and because of what was happening in the financial market, um, even though these people were making payments and weren't in default, they couldn't refinance.
Right.
So because of that, all these mortgages were foreclosed, and that contributed to this overwhelming number of
Yeah.
foreclosures that Cook County.
Yeah. Not to mention that all of the fraudulent loans that were done were people who got mortgages simply because they had a name, a social security, and good credit, but they certainly didn't have the wherewithal. And when you bundle these mortgages and you sell them off to the secondary market, well, the company who bundle those mortgages. Let's say you had $100 million worth of mortgages and you bundled them and you sold them off to the secondary market, and you got 4% for selling them off to the secondary market, and you did it all over again. So all these people bought these into these instruments with no idea that most of them were failed instruments. And the company that made all the money doing them were long gone. Now, there were some companies like Wells Fargo that the attorney generals sued, and they had to pay some astronomical restitution, but was not even close to the kind of damage that it had done.
In fact, Vice President Harris is uh, regarded for the work she did in California when she was Attorney General there for being able to recover a greater sum than apparently the banks were offering. You know, she apparently negotiated very toughly and was able to secure a lot more money for the various homeowners who got stuck in the middle, so to speak, of that foreclosure mess back in the 2008 through probably 2011, 12, before, you know, things kind of, the ship was kind of righted.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it was close to $1 trillion that she was able to get back
yeah,
from the
and
banks.
they were offering some much smaller number than that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So,
All right. So,
yeah.
so let's go back to you know, talking about the process.
Mhm.
So if you got the unfortunate situation of being in a default situation on your note, and that triggers filing of a lawsuit with the lender is now seeking to attempt to recover its loan amount from you by selling off the property that secures the loan. Um, so the process is such that this lawsuit, as I mentioned already, makes these allegations as part of its pleading, and allegations essentially that the loan has not been paid as in default, it's not been paid consistent with its terms, and because of that, the only way that the lender can be protected is to deem the loan in default, to enter a judgment for the loan amount, and then to foreclose on the collateral, which is usually a home. The bulk of the mortgage foreclosures deal with single family residences, but it's not exclusive there. There's commercial matters as well where foreclosures occur. Uh, and this process then results in the appointment, well, first of all, it results in a judgment of foreclosure. And uh, there's a selling officer who's appointed in order to conduct a judicial sale of the property due to the foreclosure. That is a public sale. It must be generally announced to the community. And at the sale, anyone who can demonstrate the wherewithal has a right to bid on the amount of the judgment, um, assuming they can demonstrate the ability to complete the sale. Typically, most selling officers require on the date of the offer that is ultimately becomes the highest offer, and it's a bid. It's a bidding process. So the highest bidder um, uh, is the ultimate winner, assuming they can demonstrate the wherewithal to complete the purchase. And again, as I mentioned, usually on the sale date, um, demonstration of good faith is a 10% deposit towards the purchase, with the balance of it being due in a certain period of time. Usually, I think, Mark, you probably know this better than I do, within 3 days, I believe, the balance.
Yeah, it's usually within 24 hours of the purchase. And if you purchase it on a weekend, then you have until that following Monday. But it's within 24 hours. You have to tender the balance of the
Balance.
funds.
Okay. Um, All right, so again, anybody can bid at this auction, but ultimately you got to demonstrate the wherewithal to tender the balance of the proceeds within whatever the timeline is. Uh, Mark's suggesting it's usually one day, within one day of the sale, unless it occurs on a weekend. Then you've got to the next business day in order to come up with the money. Uh, so then once that occurs, the mortgagee will then motion to have the sale confirmed. Um, so even though there's been this offer, tender of money, until the court enters a confirmation order saying that the sale is confirmed, um, then the sale is not final yet. So it takes that confirmation order to make the sale final. And there was some, at least on the federal side, bankruptcy rules, there was some change with respect to how uh, the sale versus confirmation occurred in terms of the rights of uh, the Chapter 13 debtor. Usually, that's a type of bankruptcy that might be filed in order to try to hold off on a foreclosure. Um, but once upon a time, it was that it required confirmation in order to take away the rights of the owner. Uh, Now it's sale. Um, so that time between sale and confirmation no longer uh, is a safe harbor for the mortgagor. Once the sale
So,
occurs,
I,
then rights are gone.
so
And
once the
typically,
actual sale has taken place before the confirmation.
right, it used to be confirmation, but that's no longer the case.
Mhm. Okay.
Because a lot of folks were waiting um, to for sale to occur and then running to bankruptcy court before the confirmation. Um, but then they changed the rules so that it is sale now, not confirmation, that takes away your rights. At least that's
So
my understanding.
is there any leeway or is there any argument that someone can pose? Let's say a sale took place and they went to file for a Chapter 13, which is usually the reorganization, say 3 days later, or any day after the sale had taken place.
Yeah, I think you're too late. I think you have to beat the sale in order to preserve your right to try to reinstate the mortgage through a Chapter 13 claim.
So beating the sale, let's say it's not the same day of the sale, but it's actually before the sale occurs.
Yes,
Okay. Okay. All right.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, there are situations where I can relate a situation that I once had on a case that was for foreclosure that was prosecuted in federal court. Um, but there is that possibility. Sometimes it's remote that the sale won't be confirmed. There could
Hmm.
be a situation where, for whatever reason, the court believes that the conduct of the sale was not legal, equitable, and for that reason, they may not confirm the sale, uh, and they may order um, that another sale occurred. They could appoint a different selling officer. They could order um, a different sale be conducted of the property. I had a case in federal court. This is years ago, where a man came to me and suggested that um, he was in foreclosure. The case was in federal court, which is unusual. And as I mentioned, federal courts typically are not receptive to the idea of being involved in foreclosure, especially for residential property. Um, so he said to me that he had shown up at the selling officer's office, and the selling officer in this case happened to be a lawyer. Uh, and he had arranged for his sister to be a bidder on his home in order to try to save it. So they show up at the lawyer's office, who was appointed the selling officer in the situation, and they're greeted by a woman who I assume was a secretary or some kind of support staff person in the law office. And they said they were there for the sale. And she suggested to them that the sale is going to occur at whatever the notice time was in the notice of sale, just outside the office door, essentially in a office building hallway. So they leave the interior of the office and go outside in the hallway, awaiting for this sale to occur. Uh, and I don't remember the time suggested, but in any event, they wait uh, until 30 minutes past the time of the sale, and then go back into the office and they inquire as to, well, when is the sale going to occur? And they are told by the same person who said go in the hallway, and that's where the sale is going to occur, that the sale had occurred. And they say, well, we've been waiting in the hallway since, prior to the sale time. It's now 30 minutes later after the sale time, stated sale time, and we didn't observe any proceedings that occurred in order to sell the property. Uh, and my suspicion of what occurred is that they were so accustomed to no one coming in to contest the proceedings, and they assumed no one would, and therefore they went through the motions of conducting a judicial sale, but really did not.
Wow.
Okay, so yeah, wow, exactly. So I tell this man that, because it was a story that I just could not believe that a lawyer would do something like that. Um, it's risking your license, I believe. Um, so I say, well, you go back to where you say you were, because I'm still, I'm dubious about the story I'm hearing. And I said, you come up with a description of the person that you encountered, if it's the same person there, come up with a description of her. Then come back and I'll put together a motion to quash the sale. So I go through all of that, put together the motion, relating all these facts as he has told me. Um, Noticed it up. I noticed the not only the lender but also the selling officer as well. And I asked that the sale be vacated, um, and that the selling officer be discharged, which means that he can not have any further involvement in this process. So this was really just incredible. The rest of this. So I go down, prepared to present the motion before the judge in federal court, and the courtroom is dark. So I go in to his chambers door, and I don't remember the judge's name at this point. And I asked the secretary. I said, I'm here on this matter. Um, and do you know what time the judge will convene the court? And she said to me the most incredible thing I've ever observed as a lawyer. She says, "Oh, he's already granted that motion." And I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah." He said, she said he could not believe what you described in that motion. He said that he would never accept the representations of a lender or its lawyer or the selling officer again in connection with foreclosure. He is done with them in terms of the representations that they make. So he vacated the sale without convening court. He was just that incredulous about the scenario that we had laid out.
Is that the reason that they changed the either the law or the policy that they have to have a third party and not an attorney that has any relationship with the lender to do
I
conduct the
can't
sales?
say that for sure, because they still have great discretion in terms of putting someone in place in order to um, complete the process.
Yeah,
Um,
because we have here in Chicago where we are, we have three different, well, four actually. There is a judicial, there's an intercounty, there is the sheriff, and then there's Heavener. So there's four uh, authorized selling agencies that are
that
authorized to conduct
Yeah, that's state court though.
purchases. Yes.
Federal court, although as I mentioned, the federal judges tend not to be involved, want to be involved in residential foreclosures. It's human tragedy, if you will. Um, so they tend to have more discretion over there in terms of what they do. I don't believe is a federal rule that dictates who can be a selling officer. I think that the federal judges, trial court judges, there retain the ability to appoint essentially anybody they want.
Hmm.
Um, but this has been, I can't even tell you how many years ago. It's got to be probably more than 30 years ago. But this judge was just totally outdone by what we set forth in the motion, to the extent that he would not even allow the mortgage company to file a response.
Wow. Yes. I can imagine back then it was there was a lot of um, unorthodox dealings back then. I've been in the real estate business now more than 40 years, and I can tell you that there were some operations going on that stories like what you're saying is um, was a thing of the norm back then.
Mhm. Mhm.
They weren't the exception. They were not the exception. And I think that the certainly in some respects the courts have put more protections in place against those sort of things. However, uh, as you said, that the courts there is to be the referee, right, to make sure that it is equitable to both sides. And usually the foreclosure process here in Cook County takes quite a bit of time once it happens, because I think the courts give every opportunity for the property owner to try to redeem that asset, because nobody wants to foreclose. It's not a benefit to the bank to foreclose, despite people's idea of thinking that banks want to take your property. It's just not a reality, because it becomes a liability for the bank. And they would much rather keep it as an asset where they're receiving the interest, and they don't have these default rates, because they have also requirements themselves to that their default rates can't exceed a certain level.
Yes. And one thing we ought to mention here in Cook County, at least, there is a mediation process that is part and parcel of the foreclosure process, where it's mandatory uh, that both the lender and the borrower engage in this mediation to see whether or not it's possible for the borrower to right the ship, if you will. And of course, the lenders aren't pleased about it, but I'm sure there's situations that has been helpful and productive for the borrower to be able to, remedy the default and right the ship, and also be able to maintain their interest in the real estate. And you're absolutely right. The lenders are not looking forward to foreclosing on your real estate. It's an absolute last resort, because as you know, uh, once they take title, then they then have the obligation for taxes, maintenance of the property, complying with local codes, et cetera, et cetera. They then are a neighbor, if you will, in the community. So they have the same obligations uh, to be a good neighbor, if you will, as anyone else. And that means hiring a property manager to look over it, check on it, cut the grass, shovel the snow, all those sorts of things that if you had a live neighbor living in the unit would be taken care of because most of us want to maintain our properties in a fashion that will enhance its value and also enhance the overall neighborhood. So generally, they are not interested. The original lender is not interested in taking your property back.
Right.
We're really not taking it back, but taking your property because they don't own it unless you happen to purchase it from them as a result of another foreclosure that could have occurred. But they're not interested because it involves a lot of cost on their end and a lot of requirements. Uh, heating and so forth. All these things that an occupied property um, uh, would be responsible for by the owner is now laid at the feet of the mortgage company. And they really don't want that. And as you mentioned, Mark, it does affect their default rate and also how the federal government looks at their lending practices in terms of whether or not they're primed for a takeover by the federal government
Exactly.
if the practices are too loose. So yeah,
Right.
they don't want those bad results.
Right. All right. Listen, before we go, I want to say that those of you who are listening or viewing and watching on Instagram, we're going to be leaving Instagram shortly. So, but you can hop over on Facebook or you could hop over on YouTube as we continue. We're going to close out this part of the program. Judge Murray, thank you very much for talking about this. We're going to continue this conversation a little bit further next week because it's just one of those areas that people um, are not certain about some of the things, and I think we can give people a lot more comfort understanding that the process is not a takeover. It's not where banks want to take over. And that's really what I wanted to assure
Yeah,
people is that it is just not never in the bank's interest
yeah. And
to.
one area I hope we'll touch on next week is the reverse mortgage.
Yes, yes. We will talk about reverse mortgages. And I think, yes, we'll talk about reverse mortgages, whether they are a good, effective tool or whether they're a bad tool. We're going to talk about that next week. And I'm making a special note of that to make sure that we talk about it because it is, it's a very interesting process, but I think that there are some things that really need to be clarified. So we're going to talk about that next week. So I want to thank you very much for coming up. I'm glad you brought that up. So that's going to be our hot topic next week. So make sure you join us next week for the legal hour as we're going to be talking about reverse mortgages. Are they good or are they bad? We're going to talk about it next week on the People Show. All right, Judge Murray, thank you so much for being here with us.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Okay, see you next week. All right, folks. Listen, I'm going to talk. We're going to switch over a little bit. Again, hopefully, those of you who are on Instagram jump on over to YouTube or to Facebook. And next week, we'll be talking about reverse mortgages on the legal hour. But I want to go back to just before we close out. I want to go back to what I was talking about earlier because I think it's so vitally important. That you have accurate information, factual information. There is so much misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is just people who are putting out information that they don't really know about. But disinformation is worse. Disinformation are the people who actually know the difference and know that the information or the misinformation that they're putting out there is wrong, and they have the purpose on misleading people. So that's what we have been having a lot of going on is this disinformation movement. And so I believe that if you have a platform, I was on trans, terrestrial radio. I was on WVON 1690 AM here for well over 10 years. I've been doing a podcast now, I guess going on almost 2 years now with intellectualradio.com on Mondays from 7 o'clock till 9. And then I do a couple of podcasts throughout the week. And of course, on Tuesday nights, we have Legal Hour with Judge Murray that we discuss legal issues. But my objective is to never put information out that is inaccurate information. Anything that I put out, you can go and you can verify it. Or if you are listening to someone's program, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a news outlet, whatever the outlet is, and especially on some of these TikToks and uh, you know podcasts. I mean, because anybody can do a podcast these days, and people have very different motivations. My motivation is to make sure that the information that we put out is information that is accurate and true, and information that can inform you so that you can go on to make good decisions. All right, so that is really what my mission is. Now, I think with this election, there are a lot of people who are putting out information that is completely erroneous information about Kamala Harris, the now candidate for the presidency of the United States of America, and I think that people should make sure that they get the accurate information. I am constantly researching and studying and looking for the accurate information, and I always go through several different sources before the information that I get confirmed or put out. It has to come from at least 3 credible sources before you could actually consider that to be um, credible information. And I think that when you see something that is posted, if it is not corroborated by 3 of the mainstream media, that's journalism 101. If it is not corroborated by at least 3 of the mainstream media outlets, it didn't happen. It did not happen. And there are sources that are putting disinformation out there to mislead people because they know that it works. They know that it works. So those of you who tune into this program, you can always go and verify the information that comes through this program, because we work very hard to make sure that we are putting out accurate, credible information. Because I believe that if you have an outlet, I don't care how small or big it is, you have a responsibility, especially if you have 1 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 people listening to you. You have a duty to making sure that the people who trust you and trust what you are saying, to make sure that you provide them with accurate information. Now, as it relates to, I started talking about earlier, Cornel West. Cornel West, and one of the reasons why I stress this is because Cornel West is a learned man. He is a PhD, he's a scholar, and he is well adapted to the issues and the historical impact of those. And so what his motivation is to continue doing what he is doing now, I can't speak to that. I can't speak to that because I'm not certain. Now, he says it is about challenging the status quo, so that we can receive justice. Those who are being left out, locked out, and overlooked. I agree. I agree with that 100%. However, there are differences between the 2 sides. There is a difference between the extreme, and I'm careful to not lump every Republican in that. So I use the word extreme because there are extremists that just don't care about the democratic process. They don't really care about having a real discussion, to discuss ideas, to debate the solutions to problems, and then to deliberate and come up with an agreed approach. That's what democracy is. We have people who just want to blow that up and to put in what they believe it should be. And in much of what we have seen proposed by the extremists is nothing that looks like democracy. Project 2025, that 922-page manifesto, there's nothing democratic about it, what they want to do. And we should, even if you don't agree, which I was so proud of what I saw at the Democratic National Convention, to see that looked like America to me. It was black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Christian, Jews, Hindus, whatever your faith commitment, whatever your ethnic commitment, and it had Democrats, Republicans, and independents. That's what democracy is, and that's what we should be about. We may not necessarily agree about every issue. However, if we sit down to the table and we agree to at least have a intelligent, respectful discourse about whatever the issue is, and we look at history as to how those issues have been approached, whether it's by Democrats, whether it's by Republicans, or whether it's by both, and agree to come up with solutions that advance and move us forward. That to me is what democracy is about. Doesn't matter what the flag that you fly under. In many respects, I believe that the flags that we fly under are distractions. They're distractions from us having the kinds of discourse that we need to have in order to move forward. Now, I am a registered Democrat. That doesn't make me a loyalist to the Democratic Party. That happens to be the party that I believe that I can best work with to try to make things better in the country for people who need help the most, to lift people out of poverty. I don't see any policies that come from the other side that they have proposed or passed that help the average American or poor people. Nothing. And I've challenged people to provide to me one, not two, but one policy that the other side has proposed and passed that helps the average working American, or certainly the average black person in this country. Just one policy in the past 50 years. I've been asking for that for maybe 10 years or so, and I still haven't gotten that policy yet. So my point is that the other side does not offer any real objective ideas that we can work on to come up with solutions for people who need help the most by our government, and creating opportunities for people to participate and to thrive. So now, regardless of whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, if you are earnest, and if you are honest, if you care about our democracy, even if you do not agree with the philosophy of the Democratic Party or Kamala Harris, but you agree that Kamala Harris is interested and wants to maintain our democracy, then there is no other choice. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the choice that we should support and elect, and then we at least have the foundation that this country has been working to improve and to make it more of towards a perfect union. We're nowhere close there, but we're certainly making some progress. And we can debate on what the levels of that progress is. We know that it needs to be a lot more. I think we can all agree that it needs to be a lot more. But I think what we have to basically, where we are now, is to fundamentally agree that, okay, the only choice that we have, and then we can organize ourselves together to discuss what the ideas are, to deliberate on those, and come up with policy solutions for solving problems, moving us forward. The Biden-Harris administration have passed some tremendous policies with the Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Bill, CARES Act 2. Those policies, those bills, those pieces of legislation, out of them, tremendous help for poor people are coming through those programs. $1 trillion being put into the economy to help average Americans and poor people. $1 trillion. The previous administration put $2 trillion to help the top 1%. No investments made to help the average working family or the average working person, or certainly poor people in the country. And now they have these extreme ideas that they want to dictate to women their health care or their reproductive care. Wherever you fall on an idea about abortion, it's none of my business. It's none of my business to dictate to anybody their medical condition. That is between that person and their doctor. I don't even believe that we should be trying to moralize on people who are making health care decisions for themselves. What we should be doing is focusing on the things that really matter. They get us distracted on some of these other issues. Now, I will always err on the side of right to say that every person has the right to make their medical decisions about their life and their body with their doctor, and the government has no place in it, period. You don't have an opinion about a person's medical. That's why we have HIPAA, right? You have a right to your privacy. So why does a government, or why does certain people within the government want to dictate your medical decisions about your life? Period. So that's my position on it. So, but getting to the point of just saying that we have to not allow for this person to be reelected again. We all know his history and all that sort of thing. I just find it hard to even repeat the person's name. The former president, and I don't, I'm trying to refrain from getting into name calling, but the former president is a complete disaster. He is a train wreck. And now that we're making some progress, let's continue that progress. Let's continue that progress. And the best opportunity that we have to continue that progress, the best opportunity that we have is that with Kamala Harris. That's the best opportunity that we have. All right, listen, if you want to call in, you can call me at 951-221-8221, 951-221-8221. Let me hear what your thoughts are. But when you look at the policies that have come out of this administration, think about this. They were able to stop or to lift half of the children who were living in poverty out of poverty by passing the child tax credit under the American Rescue Plan. Half. Putting $1 trillion in infrastructure back into communities, underserved communities that had been disinvested in. And these are investments that will be going for a long time. In Illinois, where I'm from, there's some $46 billion that are going to be coming to the state of Illinois through the Investing in America. I've gone down through the entire list of the states and how much money that they're getting through these policies. And even Republicans who didn't vote for and voted against, they're bragging about the investments that they're being able to get as a result of these policies. And they like to brag about, low taxes and that sort of thing. But the problem is that you have other states that are supporting many red states because they don't want to have the kinds of appropriations, and they want to brag themselves on having low taxes. They also have very low revenues. So that means that other states, like blue states, have to subsidize and send money to other states. So the federal government takes money and gives more money back to those states than it does to the states that are paying. So in other words, a state like Illinois gets less money back than it pays into, and states like Kentucky gets more money back than it pays into. So we have other states that are subsidizing the other states because they won't. States with the highest poverty rates. There are about 12 or 13 states. There are, out of those 12 or 13 states, there's only one state that is led by Democratic legislation or legislators, which is New Mexico, that has a high poverty. The rest of them are red states or Republican-controlled legislatures. And much of that is because they don't want to have the businesses paying their fair share of taxes. Do you know in 1965 what the top tax rate was for corporations? 94%. In other words, if you made more than $400,000 as a CEO, every dollar over that $400,000, you had to pay 94 cents in taxes. Now, what that did was it made corporations invest into people, invest in their companies, creating more jobs, and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, when Ronald Reagan came into office, he slashed that number down to 35% and allowed for corporations to shift their jobs overseas. We lost more than 46,000 manufacturers to the tune of about 25 million jobs. We suffered greatly through what I call the Ronald Reaganism period, and we paid dearly for that. This idea that government gets in the way, they like to say, Republicans like to say, spending when Democrats are in control. When Republicans are in control, they don't call what they do spending. But largely Democratic policies or Democratic control policies are investments. Like, for instance, the GI Bill. That was an investment. And the analysis that was done, they cut the program out, and the analysis that was done demonstrated that for every dollar that we invested into a soldier, we got $7 back. Why? Because they went to school, they were trained, they were lawyers, they were now doctors, and they're earning higher livings and paying more into the federal government. So it was an investment. And the federal government got $7 back for every dollar that it invested under the GI Bill. So this idea of what they're calling big spending, $2 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%, which I think is about 85 people, is unconscionable. It's unconscionable that you and I will end up having to pay, or our children or our grandchildren will end up having to pay. And of course, they're trying desperately to get them to get uh, Donald Trump reelected because they want to expand and extend those tax um, credits, or those tax giveaways, I should say, which he's supposed to be doing some sort of speech. I think it is either tomorrow or the next day in New York, touting that program to his wealthy donors. All right, but we can get we can talk about policy and get into the nuances of that. But I just want to talk about the fundamental of protecting our democracy. Let's you and I protect our democracy. Let's protect our democracy. Let's get out, talk to the people in your trusted circles, talk to the people in circles that you don't necessarily agree with, and people that are in your family that are leaning that way, and help them to understand that that's not a good way to lean, not for themselves or for the country. And when you think about what the Trump administration did for poor people or against poor people when he was in office, cut the SNAP benefits by 42%, cut housing by 47%, affordable housing. So, and we already have a critical problem with affordable housing. So, there's a clear distinction about which of the two that we can best work with, that we can best challenge and get things done in our communities and in the country. And in my view, it is clear that it is only the Harris-Walz ticket. And then downstate, think about this. The next president is going to in their first 100 days, they are going to seat 47 federal judges. 47 federal judges. Over their first 4 years, they will seat about 150 federal judges. These are lifetime appointments. The Biden-Harris administration has appointed more women and more black people to the bench than any other president in history. We have a black Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson. He has more black people in his cabinet than any other administration. And of course, we have a black vice president. So those positions mean something because they identify with our communities, and they identify with the conditions of our communities, and they make decisions that will impact our communities. You elect the next administration or the former administration. They had one black person in their cabinet, and that person cut housing availability and affordable housing by 47%. As the Secretary of HUD. So we have to think about this, right? It's very clear where we have to be. All right, listen, that is going to do it for the night. I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Bernard H. Make sure you tune in. I probably may be doing one other podcast this week, but I will certainly put the announcement out. But certainly, if you don't see me this week, you will certainly see me back here Monday night for my regularly scheduled program of The People Show on intellectualradio.com, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We are no longer on X because I refuse to give money to that outlet because of the person who owns it. So we are on YouTube, Instagram, and on Facebook on intellectualradio.com on Monday nights at 7 o'clock. I want to thank you all for tuning in to the program. Come back. Certainly want to hear from you. We have a new call-in number. I want you to call in so we can dialogue and have exchange. Let's work together. Let's organize together. If you're here in Chicago, make sure that you join us on Thursday nights for our 10 by 10 to win meeting, where we're organizing and building a Black independent voting bloc. We want to build it 1 million strong so that we have a strong Black voice in terms of shaping policy for the advancement of Black communities in Chicago, Cook County, and in the state of Illinois, and hopefully that we can be a model for Black organizing around the country. All right, so I'm going to look forward to seeing you all on Monday night, right back here for the Monday night edition of The People Show on intellectualradio.com, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you all for tuning into the program. Thank you, Judge Murray, for being here with us. We'll be right back here again next Tuesday night for the Legal Hour on The People Show on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Thank you all so much. Good night.